So, thank you for joining this IET webinar looking at the anatomy of a hack. I'm Stephen Stewart, and I'm a committee member of the IET Media Network, and I've been in the broadcast industry for rather too many years, something like 40 years, in various roles, but always related to either producing or distributing film content and television programs. We'll probably refer to them as content in this session. If you're not familiar with the IET Technical networks, there are many of them, ranging from aerospace to tribology, and of course media, and they all share the same benefits, as you can see here. The QR code will take you to the technical network area of the IET website for you to have a look around. You can also find us on all the usual platforms, YouTube, and all the other platforms that we're familiar with, and this session will be launched onto the YouTube channel in a few days' time for people to watch it afterwards. But anyway, as I say, today's session is focused on security, and it's part of a series of security webinars. Previous sessions have included things like lots of different things, and they're all on the YouTube channel. And I'll put the details of the next session up in April. But for now, let's get into today's session, which is the anatomy of a hack. So I'm joined by three experts in the areas of content security who will guide us through the world of content security through their individual lenses, ranging from law enforcement, when things have gone wrong, best practices to adopt to avoid things going wrong in the first place, and then practical steps to protect your content, as well as some real-life experiences of what happens when the hackers attack. So, welcome, panelists. Thank you for joining us. First of all, Terry, please introduce yourself, your background, and the role you play today.
Good morning from sunny Los Angeles, or good afternoon, I think, for most of you. My name is Terry Davis. I am the president of Trusted Partner Network, which is wholly owned by Motion Picture Association. I started life in post-production in London as a receptionist, working my way up through post-production. Ended up at a studio who was my customer at the time, Columbia TriStar, which then became Sony Pictures. I moved to LA in 2000 and worked my way up through Sony Pictures, finally being the executive vice president of worldwide product fulfillment, which basically meant we did all of the post-production and operations work for anything post-theatrical or post-first air date. So a lot of localization, compliance, and so on, and a lot of vendor management around the world. I then had a brief stint back at Deluxe, went back to my roots with post-production, and then moved to a non-theatrical company where, believe it or not, I was acquiring and distributing content, which really is my passion as a super fan. It's probably why we're all in this industry. And then 3 years ago, I joined Motion Picture Association to breathe new life into the Trusted Partner Network program, which is a global content security initiative. For those of you who don't know, Motion Picture Association it is a 101-year-old trade association, and the members are the major Hollywood studios. So I think it's easier these days to say everybody apart from Apple Studios rather than list all of them. And what Trusted Partner Network does is we work with the studios to agree content security best practices across the industry. And then those best practices are used to do security assessments on a voluntary basis of any vendor of those studios, so that the studios have a centralized place to go to check the security status of all of the vendors to whom they entrust their valuable content. That's me. I look forward to chatting a bit more later.
Thanks, Terry. That's great. Gary, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's good afternoon, everyone, from me, as I'm in the not so sunny London as Los Angeles. But I'm Gary Robinson, a detective superintendent in the City of London Police. I'm currently the head of funded units, which are joint public and private collaborations, comprising of 3 individual units. One is the Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit, one is the Dedicated Card and Payment Crime Unit, and the third one is the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department. All 3 teams operate across the UK, all targeting organised crime groups. I won't bore you with my 25-year policing history, but probably more relevance to this. Previous to my role, my current role, I was the City of London Police's cybercrime response, having responsibility as Senior Investigating Officer for cyber-dependent crime, and also assisting in the development and implementation of Cyber Griffin, which is an initiative that helps businesses and individuals in the city protect themselves from cybercrime. That's probably all you need to know from me about now. I could talk to you around terrorism, I can talk to you around child sexual exploitation, but we're not here for that. So I'll hand back to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Gary. And last but not least, Ray, a last-minute addition to our panel due to somebody going down with flu. So thanks for stepping in, Ray. Please tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. My name is Raymond Evans. I am standing in for Chris, who was supposed to be here, but he's not feeling well today. I started out my journey into the world of cybersecurity in a very untraditional way. I started out, or non-traditional, I should say. I started out in U.S. military, loading bombs on planes and repairing guns on planes. Had an opportunity to take some cybersecurity courses and step into a cyber warfare role, doing defense for our nation in the realm of cyber. Helped stand up some of their cyber protection teams, or traveled all around the world responding to incidents, and moved from there to helping Space Force stand up their cyber operations centers and establishing all of their cybersecurity standards to protect satellites and rockets going into space. And then from there, moved over to an organization where I performed reverse engineering of foreign assets and exploit development. And then from there, I retired out and started working at Convergent DS full-time as the Director of Offensive Security, where I'm now taking my knowledge that I learned in the military and helping build up the team that's helping defend studios and do penetration testing and finding all the vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ray, and thanks, everyone. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the session, I thought it'd be worth just sharing some statistics about the size of the problem that we're discussing and why it's important. We all know the critical role that media, film, broadcast, and television shares in sort of changing and shaping public opinion, culture, and entertainment. And in this session, we're going to focus on two key areas. Firstly, the actual stealing of content, whatever the motive. And secondly, the kidnapping of content and holding it to ransom. A single ransomware attack can cost the media millions in lost revenue and operational disruptions. So that will be one of our subjects. The media sector, I think, is particularly attractive to hackers due to the high value of pre-release content and the intellectual property that is included in that, and increasingly consumer data as well. So all those three things are very important. And I think our discussion today is timely as there's an increased frequency and increased sophistication of the cyber attacks attacking our industry, because they're becoming ever more reliant on digital platforms and the internet. And one thing to say before we get into the stats is that on the Zoom platform, there's a Q&A function. So if there's time at the end, we'll run through some of the questions. Can't promise to get them all answered, but please use the Q&A function for any questions you want me to put to the panelists. That's there and available now. So some statistics, and I've written these down so I don't get them wrong. 3 in 10 media vendors are susceptible to compromise due to vulnerabilities that can be detected through internet exposure. And that's according to research from BlueVoyant. The percentage of vulnerable media companies is twice the level of multi-industry benchmarks of companies. So media isn't doing a great job, according to that research. And about half of all media companies providing content management solutions have vulnerabilities that could put them at risk, again, according to that report. And media companies also tend to delay patching. 60% of vulnerable systems have remained unprotected for up to 6 weeks after a patch has been released. So some scary thoughts there specifically for media. some real world examples, and it's not a new problem, but back in 2014, there was a big studio hack that exposed sensitive data and completely disrupted operations. In 2017, Netflix and HBO had breaches that hit the headlines. And then a ransomware attack happened to Sinclair Broadcast Group in 2021, which caused massive financial losses. They reportedly lost $63 million in advertising revenue just during the fourth quarter of 21, and incurred $11 million in costs and expenses related to mitigating the attack. And that was well in excess of their insurance coverage. So there's the background to everything. So we're going to look at it. We're going to look at the what, the how, and what we can do about it. So some scary statistics there. So Terry, I'll come to you first. And maybe with a previous hat on, you've been at companies that have suffered at the hands of hackers. Can you just talk us through how the incidents maybe first came to light, the impact they had on the business, but also the human impact on you and your team in dealing with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's you go, anyone who has been through this, I'm sure what I'm going to say is going to resonate. You literally go through the entire scale of human emotion, right? Anger, denial, or maybe denial first. Like, no, this can't be happening. Anger second, and then you get this sinking acceptance feeling, and then you're spurred into action. What are you going to do about it? Now, for me, in both cases, I was in operations, and operations, I think, our holy grail is the due date, right? So in some ways, for me, running the operations was almost easier for me because I had this holy grail. I knew the mission was not to fail the due date. In one instance, I remember walking our floor, our team floor, and upending recycle bins and trying to piece together printed out status reports to try and understand where all of my hundreds of thousands of in-flight assets were and how I could pull them together. I phoned my vendor community and said, "Do you have a spare laptop?" "Yes, I'm sending team member A to you." "Do you have a room?" "Yes, I'm sending 5 team members to you," just to stand up triage. So I think being on the operations side, you at least have that holy grail. I mean, I really saw our legal, sales, marketing, HR teams completely paralyzed, right? Because it was much harder for them to get back up and running. But the real toll that I saw, as you mentioned, Stephen, was the human impact. I mean, it's just terrible trying to lead a team through the personal effects of this happening. In one instance, all of our personal information was leaked on WikiLeaks and on the dark web. My kids went to the daycare at this particular place of work. Their social security numbers are out on the dark web, and they weren't even out of preschool. I mean, the absolute impact. People who had left the company, all of their information was leaked. Information going up on WikiLeaks included internal executive chats that now everybody could see about very, very secure things, and not just business strategy, what X person thought of Y person, what everybody was earning, the salaries. We all knew what everybody was earning, which, is a sort of social engineering impact was massive across a very large organization. Some of us had the dubious honor of trying to maintain client confidence in us, while, behind the scenes, we were trying to piece everything together. Professional reputations were at stake. It's very hard to explain, this could happen to you and you should be a little kinder to me right now, but nobody wants to hear it. You have a disease and everyone wants to step away and quarantine you and put you in the corner. And then the pressure on the teams trying to pull this together. I actually had to deal with a IT professional have literally had a nervous breakdown in our office. We had been out to Best Buy and bought laptops, and I'd asked my team to bring in their own laptops, and we had found our way to a separate division's unaffected network. But the IT professional didn't realize that, and he literally ran in our office, pulling laptops out of docking stations. The pressure was just too much, and unless you've been through it, you do not understand that human element and how absolutely terrible it can be. And then, of course, as you're cleaning up, there's the factor of, this has been an existential crisis for the company's reputation, and there will be lots of work. There will be customers who don't want to know, and they'll pack up their stuff and they'll leave. So then you're dealing with layoffs as well, on top of all of that human injury that has happened to these poor employees. You cannot underestimate the human element. And I think it's something that's rarely talked about, right? We talk about the revenue impact and the operational, how, XYZ, cyber insurance as well. What are they doing to support? And all of that is relevant. But that human aspect should not be underestimated. And then,
Wow.
and then not even to mention, if it's a ransomware attack, you may also end up dealing with that company, and a gentleman's business transaction. Oh, you gave us the money. Here's our customer support number to decrypt your data. And you just have to trust it.
Wow.
It's
That's
very
scary stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
Wow. So Ray, moving on to you, you're described as an ethical hacker, so maybe on the other side of the fence from what Terry was talking about. Now you advise media companies on their cybersecurity preparedness and how they can avoid becoming victims. So tell us a bit about your first-hand experience of either dealing with the hackers or being part of that community.
Oh boy, do I have stories for about dealing with hackers, especially in my time as a cyber protection team member. Terry was very correct in saying that there is a heavy human element in dealing with this kind of stuff. I had to personally deal with the OPM breach that occurred, and had to do some incident response and digital forensics when that occurred. And that was a huge impact that's still being felt today by Americans all across the country, because all of their personal data was stolen, and it's still being used by attackers today to try to impersonate them. From the human element of my team, we had to rapidly respond. We were called what's a quick reaction force team. It was a small group of us that would initially get on site and perform triage. And when events like this happened, I would literally have to call my wife and be like, honey, pack my bag. I'm going to come get it in about an hour, and I got to go. And I would go home, grab my bag real quick, get on site a couple hours later for wherever we flew to, and then just start working until our fingers bled, and our follow-on forces came the next day to relieve us. And there were literally days where we would work 36-hour days responding to these incidents until our follow-on forces came, because some actor could be in the network actively doing something, and we couldn't let them just get away with compromising the data and potentially impacting real world missions that were occurring. And so there was a high level of stress every single time we did that. But there was also a high level of excitement of running around and prepping your tools and getting your laptops and getting everything packed up and rushing out to see what was happening. But the human impact was a very real impact. And there were some individuals that got super burnt out very quickly and just could not keep up with the pace of that kind of mission tempo. So dealing with the hackers can be very exciting, can be very stressful, and can be very, very time consuming, and also financially consuming, because you got to get individuals out to the sites. You have to buy the tools and the secure storage to be able to pull data and do forensics on the data. You have to pay people to be able to be there all the way up until that incident is resolved. And then if you have any kind of impact to your customers, you then have to pay for, like example, OPM. You have to pay for credit monitoring for everybody who was impacted by that. You have to deal with lawsuits from the impact of that. So it's just easier to put proper security in place at the beginning than to have to deal with all the financial and time-related and human-related impact at the tail end.
And just quickly, OPM, what does that stand for?
It's the Office of Personnel Management. Basically, it's the office that has almost everybody's social security numbers and birth records in America. If anybody's ever dealt with the government in any form or fashion, their information sits at OPM. And they had a massive breach. Let's see, 2015, they had a massive data breach, which impacted 22 million Americans.
Wow, bro, scary stuff. And Gary, Ray says it's exciting and interesting dealing with hackers. You're at the sharp end of this. Not sure whether you describe it as exciting, but they're getting ever more professional and organized. Can you just talk us through one particular success you've had or one example of what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't say how much for sharp end either, but I will talk you through an operation that the Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit dealt with. I wouldn't necessarily say the most organised group, but it's certainly of interest. So it was dealt with under the name Operation Saucon, which had organised criminality behind it as far as we're concerned. But this operation centred around an individual called Skylar Dazil. And I can name names because they are convicted, so we are fine with this. But in short, she was an international hacker who'd been conspiring with a US-based, and I'm conscious here of acronyms and abbreviations. I was about to say OCG, that's Organised Crime Group, operating Leak.cx, which is a dark web trading platform for unreleased music. The actual investigation was referred into us, the police, by the International Federation of the Phonographic Institutes, the IFPI. The IFPI identified Skylar was the individual responsible for selling unreleased music from the artist Taylor Upshaw. Now, I'm going to show my age because I didn't know who Taylor Upshaw was, but she is a very successful American singer and songwriter. But the matter was originally referred to US law enforcement, but by resolving the IP addresses, it was identified Skylar resided in the UK and hence ended up with us. We then subsequently arrested her at a home address in Luton in the UK, and we went about seizing as much digital evidence as we could. Now, a full integration of the digital evidence seized and the devices resulted in the identification of about 9,000 victims from across the music industry, so large scale here. Don't worry, I'm not going to sit and list 9,000 artists to you now, but of note, we did evidence from Taylor herself, Melanie Martinez, who again is a successful American singer-songwriter, and hopefully people will know this one, Coldplay, also as victims. Now, the identification of organised criminality actually came from the subsequent financial investigation that we did. This showed a connection to a US-based OCG, and Skylar shared a crypto wallet with 5 other individuals based in the US. It was established that she was, and you mentioned it earlier, Terry, a super fan who was actually being groomed herself by the US-based OCG to become a hacker. The MO used by Skylar and the OCG she represented was to attack the artist directly. Skylar would use her super fan skills to create a dox on her targeted artists. Now, doxing has historically been known for the practice of revealing personal information about someone online without their consent. And I'm showing my age now. The word first emerged in the world of online hackers back in the 1990s, where anonymity at that time was deemed sacred. And in most cases, people's real live world identities were unknown to their friends or their rivals. But a feud between hackers might escalate when someone decided to drop docs on somebody else. And that is post documents revealing their legal name and who they've been known, how they're known, username and aliases. So without going off piece too much, because doxing, and I'm sure Ray will nod here, is probably another whole webinar in itself. I'll bring this back. In short, Skylar would create in-depth notes on the targets, which helped identify networks, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. And the unreleased music itself was obtained through SoundCloud, Box, and Dropbox, but this was obtained by educated guesses at passwords from the docs information that later developed. And this then turned into brute force attacks later on as she was being educated by the OCG and then started to experiment with malware also. So if Skylar and the group could not target the artists directly, they'd also look at secondary victims. We had examples of sound engineers being targeted after that as well. So we've always got to be conscious of that. With us, she answered no comment to all the questions we put to her, but we did manage to charge her with 15 offences under copyright and POCA legislation. POCA is Proceeds of Crime Act. And she was subsequently found guilty at Luton Crown Court. Now, she did receive a 2-year in prison sentence for this. However, it was suspended. It's a sad state of affairs when criminality of this level doesn't receive a prison sentence. There is heavy mitigation in this case, and I can't go into the mitigation with you, unfortunately. But certainly from a law enforcement perspective, we would always advocate for an imprisoned sentence where this is concerned, because also it helps to send messages. Now, this case, it still continues because there's further parts of the OCG, as we've mentioned, we've identified, and they're in the US. We are working with US colleagues at this moment in time, and we will hopefully dismantle this network, but it is being heavily led by US authorities at this time. So an insight, Stephen.
I know, lots of detail there and fascinating, and that really covers off the what that we've been discussing. I want to move on to the bit more of the how, and I'll come back to you, Ray, on this. And without turning this into a training course for hackers, how do these hackers ply their trade? How do they get access to the servers? How do they do what they do so successfully? I
will give you 3 attack vectors that the hackers use routinely. One is the biggest threat, which is the human element. The biggest risk to any organization anywhere is the humans that work inside of it. You get one individual who doesn't understand cybersecurity properly. You give them a phishing email. They click that link. They download the PDF and enable the macros or the Word doc or the Excel file, and you have access to the network. You can do your best for implementing intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems, but if an attacker is using something unique that's going to bypass those systems that hasn't been seen before, and they get just the right single person in that organization, they can get a foothold. Blue team members have to get everything right every single time. A red team individual, a hacker, only has to get it right once to get access. You can fail 99 times, one time, get you in. Another issue that we see is outdated systems. Patching and updating is very, very important. There are some low-hanging fruits out there that are very easy to exploit and get into networks with. And if organizations aren't investing time and money into updating and patching their networks, the attackers are going to get in. And then lastly, the implementation of new and emerging technologies. Right now, the big risk is generative AI. Everybody wants to plug a generative AI into their forward-facing applications that have connections to their backend and to backend networks and systems and whatnot. And if they don't understand how to properly set up new and emerging technologies and defend those new and emerging technologies, such as applying the correct filters for generative AI, the attackers who are spending immense amounts of time on these new and emerging technologies are going to slip through using those entryways. So train your people, update your stuff, and make sure anything new that you're putting on your network is properly protected, and you understand the technology that you're implementing.
If I could add to that, Stephen, as well. So just to share some numbers with you guys from the Trusted Partner Network program, right? So we have about 1,400 service provider companies. So in other words, companies that store, transfer, process content on behalf of our studios. So 1,400, 96% of the assessments that we have done for those 1,400 companies have remediation items. Let me say that again. 96% of our assessments have remediation items. That's staggering. We have a sister division within Motion Picture Association called ACE. They do a similar job to Gary. I'm sure they work with the UK law enforcement. So ACE gets called in whenever there is an incident. And we work closely with ACE because we want to make sure that what they see happening out in the field, we do a 360 review and make sure that whatever they're discovering as their top trends are covered in our best practices, right? So we're working very closely together. We took a look at last year's data and what ACE is seeing out in the field when there are incidents is the top 3 issues. One is a lack of enabled MFA. That's number 1. Number 2, weak passwords, as Ray just said, just weak passwords, weak password policies, not refreshed, not complex enough. And then the third are weak firewalls. So then you take those 3 findings from ACE and we take a look at what we're seeing in our security assessments, and our top 5 remediate or unremediated items are MFA, passwords, firewalls, and also lack of pen testing and vulnerability scanning. And I would argue that if they did the last 2, they would probably discover the top 3. So very similar to what Ray is seeing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the questions that's come in from Alex Wood touches on the thing I said at the beginning about why do you think the media industry is performing worse than other industries in staying secure?
Well, let me add one other factor. 78. So we at TPN we charge a membership. We're a not-for-profit. We have to have funding, so we charge a membership, and the membership is based on annual gross revenue. So we're collecting some very interesting data about the companies on the post-production side and who are doing pre-release work, right? So 90% of our members do work on pre-release content. 78% of our members, that 1,400 number, have less than $5 million annual gross revenue. These are small companies. They can't afford a dedicated CISO or a dedicated security department. They're probably just ops teams doing their best and trying to deal with security on top of everything else that they're doing. So, one of the, I don't know if you want to talk about this yet, Stephen, but one of the things that we're doing, we're taking very seriously the need for us to provide free of charge resources to the industry. What can we do with our overview of the industry to help these smaller companies and larger companies? So we just published some free of charge security policy templates. I saw a question go through about disaster recovery or business continuity. Well, I don't know if you've ever sat down and written one of those plans. I mean, it is awful. And the 78% of companies who don't have dedicated security teams need help with that. So a couple of the free policy templates that we've just made available is business continuity plan, disaster recovery, incident response planning, risk management matrices. I've been in America too long. I don't know how to say it anymore. Yeah, so it's a real problem.
Yeah. And that brings it back to you, Gary. It's at the sharp end, or not the sharp end, as you said, in traditional, if there's such a thing, crime, you hear about DNA and fingerprinting and those methods that you can detect and investigate crime. What tools have you got at your disposal that helps you get to the bottom of all these problems?
I mean, I suppose where we start, investigation techniques involve a combination of technical and non-technical methods for gathering evidence and identifying people. The most important techniques used in these type of investigations is digital forensics, as you would expect, and as I probably or hopefully articulated with the Skylar case that I told you about a minute ago. and digital forensics, exactly what it says on the tin. It's the collection, preservation, and analysis of digital evidence. Digital forensics can include the recovery of deleted files, analysing metadata, and examining network traffic logs. Gone are the days, if we go back to the old days, where we would raid someone's house or premises and go through an old steel filing cabinet and find paperwork. It's obviously, times have moved on from there. But having said that, in addition to digital forensics, we may use various other techniques to gather evidence and identify suspects, and that includes conducting interviews with people, witnesses, reviewing surveillance logs, analysing financial records to track the flow of money, really. Of course, we use open source intelligence to gather information about people and suspects. But having said all that, what's key to our investigations is collaboration. Terry, you mentioned ACE. We work hand in hand with ACE all the time. It's really important because actually investigations more often than not involve multiple agencies, organisations, and it's really important for investigators to work together, to share information and to share resources. And this includes, law enforcement agencies, government agencies, private companies that specialise in cybersecurity. There's a whole raft of people that should be involved in this. Policing as well, it's really important to understand how to respond to and how to manage these incidents. It's a critical skill for any organisation, as we've already said, because you've got to safeguard against the loss of revenue, reputation, trust, and assets. And policing, we have to adopt that collaborative approach. We stick to what we've been good at previously, and that is we operate on what we call a gold, silver, and bronze model. It's part of a critical incident response to policing. It's the current command structure that we use in the UK to effectively respond to and manage critical and major incidents. And this response, this approach has been shaped over 150 years of valuable lessons that we've learned, successes and failures. So it's wrong to step away from that. So we stick with that. But if an organisation is hacked, we don't take the role of gold or silver, for example. We take the role of bronze, because nobody really should know their data and their systems better than the organisation themselves. So it's that collaborative effort and working with them and working with the incident response teams if they've got them, accepting, Terry, that not everyone has, because we then act as the bronze and we help with the recovery, the remediation, the communication, the finance, and the welfare. And it was touched on earlier. I didn't come in to comment, but one of the things we do in terms of policing, you have to always think of the victim actually in this is often someone working in the offices who's clicked on that email. They are going through the same emotional pathway as victims of more traditional crimes that we're aware of. So we often see it, and we'll go into organisations and we'll say, victim, da-da-da, and they'll say, oh yeah, we're the victim, we're the company. No, who's clicked on this link, who has accessed the system, and they're completely forgotten about. And it's really important. We must remember that, the human element to this as well.
That's a common thread running throughout everything that you're all saying, I think. So that's really interesting. And staying with the policing side, you obviously have to work within quite a strict legislative framework. Is that legislation keeping up with the technology?
Oh, good question. The first thing I'd say, and this is because I'm a UK cop in the UK, is that the UK has established a comprehensive framework of laws and regulations to protect individuals and organisations from data breaches and cyber attacks. Some of the legislation undoubtedly needs to be updated and to close some loopholes, because we generally use the Computer Misuse Act 1990. It's 35 years old. So this can be considered as actually inadvertently criminalising the security professionals trying to keep things safe and secure, because they are stepping into the shadows and the unknown, but actually they're committing crimes while doing so, whilst trying to protect their companies. Having said that, last year we had laws protecting UK consumers and businesses from hacking and cyber attacks come into effect. Manufacturers of products such as phones, TVs, smart doorbells, they're now all required to implement minimum security standards against cyber threats here in the UK. Also, consumers are coming on board more or less banned from being using easily guessable default passwords. And it's the companies that are flagging that and stopping them being used. So that's a significant leap in protecting of individuals, society, and really the economy from the criminals. And then also last part of July last year, the King's Speech. The government announced it would introduce a cybersecurity and resilience bill as well. And that bill itself is designed at strengthening our defences and ensuring that the most essential digital services are protected, really. And that's by expanding the remit of existing regulations, putting regulators on stronger footing, and also increasing reporting requirements to build a better picture in the government of what the cyber threats have. And lastly, Stephen, you probably didn't want me to talk too much about legislation, but I've grasped the nettle on this occasion because you'd expect me to. We've also got the NCSC here, so the National Cybersecurity Centre, and that plays a crucial role in safeguarding the UK's digital environment. As part of GCHQ, and it provides advice, guidance, and support to public and private sector, and it helps organisations manage cybercrime incidents, whilst also promoting best practice. And it would be remiss of me also not to mention City of London Police herself. You know, we have Cyber Griffin here, which is an initiative for those that are working within the city, those businesses, about cyber training and cyber defence, and that's again a free of charge service that we offer here. So in answer to your question, Stephen, that was a long answer. There is legislation. Yes, some of it needs updating, but we are making progress in the UK, although admittedly it's probably not as fast as we'd like. But then when is law enforcement ever keeping up with the pace of everything?
And one quick question, you always you work for the City of London Police, but you work across the whole of the UK. Why is that? Why is it that you run the whole of the UK from that side of things?
In terms of the City of London Police, we are the national lead for fraud and cybercrime in the UK. So therefore, we do have a national remit, if you like. Right. That's solely the reason.
Interesting.
I could bore you with the obviously the UK has 43 police forces and they all have their own jurisdiction, but because we are the national lead and the centre, then we can go where we like, if you like.
Right. Okay, that's fascinating. And Terry, that's Gary. He's taken us through the framework of what happens when things go wrong. And you mentioned you touched on the TPN program and ACE. Maybe a little bit more detail. You talked about best practices. So what can people do? What's the Motion Picture Association doing to help people not come across Gary and his team?
So the Motion Picture Association has been publishing content security best practices for decades. I remember being a young receptionist in a post-production company in Soho and hiding a 2-inch under my desk. God, I'm dating myself now, but hiding a 2-inch, maybe it was a 1-inch, under my desk when the man from the MPAA came round to do the audit. So for decades, they have been publishing these best practices. And the studio members use those best practices as their benchmark to do their own security assessments or leverage Trusted Partner Network. 2 years ago, I mentioned I came in, 3 years ago, I came in to refresh the program. And 2 years ago, we relaunched the program to include app and cloud as well, because up until that point, best practice content security had been really focused on site, like physical site. And of course, TPN and MPA had made good progress on touring all of these physical locations. But of course, in 2020, all of those closed and everybody moved to the cloud. So things have become much more focused on application and cloud. So now the MPA best practices include site and application security as well. Obviously, cloud is included in that. And anybody can sign up. Small membership fee, as I mentioned, based on your annual gross revenue, do your own security assessment to see what your gap analysis is against the best practices. Because honestly, with 96% who do the full assessment having remediation items, I think the biggest first step for any company is to really bite the bullet and understand what your security preparedness looks like, and then be aware of what your gaps are and what your probably long journey is to close them, or at least identify compensating controls until you can get to the whole thing. And then, as I mentioned before, we really see TPN very much as a community network, right? We're out in the industry talking to everybody, understanding initiatives and things that we can do to help support. Yesterday, I was speaking at a conference here in LA on the subject of zero trust. And the conference was attended by all of the studios, but also the big software companies, Adobe, Avid, and so on. And we were talking about zero trust and really the need for security by default, right? Security by design, of course, but security by default. So again, I'm seeing some of the comments go through in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback. And questions like, what can we do? Can we separate network? Well, really, where we're moving as an industry is to zero trust, right? And that's very hard and very costly. Movie Labs have done a great job of creating a level 1, 2, and 3. We actually now have taken their recommended practices and put them into our best practices to start that move, that shift towards zero trust. But as Ray said, and Gary's alluded to, the problems are still human. And until you trust nobody, you're going to have issues.
Yeah, on that point, Ray, you'll go into companies who are either using the best practices or starting to implement them, and you advise them on their remediations and other things. So what is it like when you go into a company for the first time and you start uncovering things they aren't doing well? How do you advise them? How do you navigate that conversation?
So it all really depends on the organization that we step into. Some organizations are very happy that we're there, and they're very accommodating. And so we'll start advising them. And every time we will lay out recommendations in a report that we publish. And we also do a walkthrough of the report with various levels of the organization, and we can get highly technical with different offices where needed and give different portions of the report to people as needed. And so some organizations we walk into, they're very happy to have us there, very accommodating. Will chat with us, we'll take our recommendations, implement them, and then we'll ask us to come back 6 months later, 90 days later, some cases, and test again to ensure that those implementations have been put into place. Those are great companies to work with. Love them. I love a company where I can feel very relaxed and comfortable with, and we can chit chat a little bit and have that friendly relationship. Now, there are some other companies where a CEO may hire us, or CFO or CISO or somebody may hire us to come in, and their IT department is very combative. Where'd that laugh come from?
Sorry, that's me.
Oh. And their IT departments may become very combative and not helpful, and may stonewall us at every chance they get by limiting our accesses. And so in those kind of cases, then we have to tailor our recommendations on our reports specifically to the higher ups who did the initial purchase of our services, and let them kind of know, like, hey, your team caused problems in XYZ, and so we weren't able to do this portion of the test or this portion of the test because we didn't have access. So it all really depends on the organization that we go into, and how they are when we go in.
If I could add,
that answer your question?
Yeah.
If I can add to that as well, I mean, it's clear, right? The successful, secure companies have buy-in at the board level, at the CEO, CFO level, and it has to trickle all the way down. I've started noticing a new phenomenon where companies who have been through the unimaginable worst, right? They've had incidents, it's been existential to them. They've come back to their customers, to us, with plans about how they're going to close the gaps, and they're committed to it. But honestly, the minute all the drama calms down, I'm seeing a new phenomenon where CEOs, CFOs, whoever, are like, oh, I know we committed to spending that money on security, but maybe we should redirect it 6 months later, customers won't notice, nobody's going to notice, we can't spend that money. And they never see it through, because it's, you know, in some cases, some of these things that need to be fixed are, you know, really expensive, timely endeavor. Especially if you're committing to something like zero trust. It's not easy to do, but, you know, I really hope there's some CEOs, CFOs on this call. You know, you gotta stay the course. You've got to invest the money. You've got to support your security teams.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree, Terry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Carry on, Ray.
Buy-in at every level is very important, and you have to make individuals in the organization feel like everybody in the organization is responsible for security, and by doing that, then you get buy-in at all the levels. And yeah, that is one of the key things that determines success or failure in any pen test. And Terry is absolutely true, correct with her assessment that there are some companies that get the reports and then don't implement the fixes. There are some organizations who we test who still have things that need fixed from 2 years ago. And we went and tested last year, and we present basically the same report again of, hey, here's everything that was in this report is still relevant today and still broken. And you know, those reports are kind of nice sometimes to put together, because all you have to do is change the date on the report and it's good to go. You don't have to rewrite anything.
And it's interesting because it makes me think, like with house insurance, if you spend a bit of money on a really fancy lock and you put window locks on everything and you make your house really secure, it makes your home insurance cheaper. Is there an element of, if company actually do spend the money on protecting their content, does that reduce their insurance premiums? Have the insurance companies got anything to say about that? I mean, Gary, you mentioned you work with the insurance bureau. Do you have thought about that?
It's probably the wrong time in the economic climate, Stephen, to talk about reducing insurance costs. So no, effectively, I think the takeaway from me for this, if you're talking about insurance, is that you have to, as a company, as an organization, you have to make sure that your insurance policy is fit for purpose for you. And that also includes your insurance policy covering social engineering policies, which, if you haven't got your instant response teams, policies that include an instant response as well, and what is the service level agreement. If I was a company, I would be looking to test the policy. I would be looking to test the insurance company before taking that particular insurance out. And that's probably the best bit of advice I can give at the moment in time.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to leave some time for questions. But I think it's important maybe to look at the future as well. And some of the questions that have come in have sort of touched on this, so I'll roll a few of them together. Where are the next threats coming from? We've heard that if you don't put 2FA in place and if you don't have complex passwords, but where are the next threats coming from? I don't know who wants to take that. Raymond?
Yeah, I can speak briefly on the future of threats. So the big, sexy future of threats comes with quantum technology. Microsoft recently had a huge breakthrough with their quantum chips, where they're using topo conductors instead of semiconductors. And what topo conductors let them do is have less errors in their qubits. So the little bits that are used for quantum computing are called qubits, right? And so you store them at a hyper cold space, hyper cold temperature, and you know the qubit can be a 1 and a 0 at the same time. It's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, as the doctor would say. But those qubits were very susceptible to the slightest errors occurring due to anything from a stray photon that was able to penetrate through, or some electron that's bouncing around that could go through and it would knock the qubit out. Well, with their new topo conductors, they've actually decreased that error rate, increased scalability, and increased their fault tolerance. And so now it self-corrects. And so with the new chip, it still has to be stored at like -50 degrees for processing. But with these new chips, they can take a 10,000 year calculation and can perform that calculation in 200 seconds, effectively rendering all cryptography moot. Currently, Microsoft's the only one that have this technology in their hands, but if it was to get produced at a larger scale for consumer purposes, and threat actor X in whatever country was to house one of these chips, and they have years worth of data from all the password hashes that they've stolen, then they can quickly go through and crack all the hashes, decode all the encryption, and get access to all the data that they have stored that they couldn't do so otherwise. So watch out for topo conductors and Microsoft's new quantum chip.
Wow. And back to you, Gary. Does that technology give you some potential new tools? If it works for the hackers, does it work for the police?
Yeah, I think the word you highlighted there, Stephen, was potential, is what I picked up on. So we don't know yet, but I would certainly say probably, quantum computing aids in formulated advanced forensic tools. And I discussed earlier about the first job on the forensic tools that we use. And that's, data recovery techniques to malware analysis. I think it's all going to improve with quantum, of course. And quantum computers can penetrate encryption, safeguarding the criminal data, hopefully giving us access to previously inaccessible evidence. That's the dream, isn't it? I suppose that's the potential. So faster analyzing and more access to different data sets.
And Terry,
my answer is much more straightforward and back to the human element, right? We see all of these issues being caused by people, and AI, of course, can be used to improve security, but it's also increasingly sophisticated phishing, text, emails, and so on. I received a text yesterday from a colleague who said, "This is so-and-so, this is my personal number, please call me, it's urgent." And I absolutely wouldn't call her. I emailed her. She's like, no, it really is me. But I'm paranoid about it, and everybody should be. I think AI is terrifying.
Terry, do you know what? You're right. But I'd say what we're seeing, certainly, AI is certainly having an impact, but it's not creating new attack vectors at this moment in time. What it's doing is enriching known attack vectors already. So it's refining the attacks, isn't it? And you mentioned phishing campaigns. Yeah, absolutely. But they've just become more automated and more technical. And that's where AI is right now. Hopefully it doesn't go any further with new attack vectors, but it's certainly enriching what we've currently got.
Well, Gary.
Here you go, Ray. You're going to spoil it for me.
I'm sad to tell you, I actually house my own large language model locally that I've trained with malicious information, malicious code, and brand new code libraries and whatnot. And with every engagement I go on, I actually generate custom callbacks, custom malware that bypasses antivirus every time. Signature-based antivirus. Now, if an organization implements heuristic-based intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems, heuristic-based will catch it because heuristics is looking at how things are interacting with the system. Is this normal for a user to do X, Y, Z? If it's not, boom, block it. And so move to heuristics-based and IDS and IPS, everybody, not signature-based.
Wow. There's a bit of advice. One thing, just moving it to the questions, that sort of comes back to a little bit of what you've just been saying, Ray. It's an education one. It's about young people who want to get into this world. Joseph says, what tips would you give for younger students, say 15 to 16, who want to get into cybersecurity? What should they expect? What should they study? And then there was another one about educating the general public. But in sort of proper education, what would your advice be if people want to get into it?
Oh, I got all kinds of tips for you. Okay. There's two great platforms. One's called Hack the Box, and the other one is called Try Hack Me. They're excellent education platforms that are hands-on training and education. They have a large range of topics, ranging anywhere from basic pen testing to blue team kind of stuff and digital forensics. So if they want to get information security and learn digital forensics and do the kind of stuff Gary was doing, hop on Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, and there's training paths. A majority of it is free. Some of it is subscription based, but they're great. They're all hands on. If you want to learn how to break into a website, there's a website called Hack This Site, where it's an entire website designed to be broken into. And then Pen Tester Labs is an excellent resource as well that has a whole bunch of free modules, free lessons that you can download. And you've got little virtual machines that you can download, house locally, and attack on your own computer. So that way you don't have any risk of Gary knocking on your door and saying, hey, we see this weird traffic coming from your network. So yeah, those are just some tips. Also attend your local B-Sides events, B-Sides 2600 meetups. Those are great meetups / mini conferences where you can go ask questions of individuals there. 2600 meetups and B-Sides meetups are super intro level friendly. Those are ran by hackers like me who want to educate and expand the knowledge and expand, our community. So definitely attend those. If they're under the age of 18, of course, take your parent with you. So that way, you're nothing weird or shady happens. I don't want to tell kids to go to an event with a bunch of adults unsupervised.
You know that knock on the door, Ray, you were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Right? Come knocking on my door. You told a bunch of kids to go to an event with adults.
We're out of time, but one question, and it might be for you, Gary, or for you, Terry, I'm not sure. Jonathan asks, are there any statistics available on the proportion of hacks that have come from insider employee or contractors, inside jobs, rather than external threats? Gary?
I'll do a quick answer first, and then Gary, I'll hand it to you. It's really, really hard to get statistics like that because mostly companies who are hacked do not want to talk about it. I mean, that's my experience. We had a very big incident third quarter last year, and everybody has been trying to persuade this company to sit on a panel and talk about their learnings, and unsurprisingly, they just don't want to. So very hard to get those stats for us, our piece of it. Gary, what do you think?
No, you're absolutely right, Terry. It's a bit of a closed shop in terms of wanting to discuss these things for reputational damage, which effectively then affects the bottom line of said company, doesn't it? So, yeah, it's very difficult to get those particular statistics, is what I'd say.
From the stats that we do have available, it is roughly 15 to 30% of hacks originate from insider threats. But again, as Terry and Gary said, that data is very, very skewed because nobody wants to reveal that their hack was caused by an insider threat.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's echoed by the final word. Frank Healy asked the question, do companies have any legal requirement to report cyber crimes? I know the answer to that is yes. It seems that companies hide these crimes for a variety of reasons, which probably make others think the problem is not that bad. So that there's a view on that. So yeah.
I could also say if you're doing work for, if it's likely if you're doing work for a major Hollywood studio, your MSA with that company will require you to report any incident that affects their content.
Yeah, and if you're plugged into the financial industry at all, you have SEC requirements as well for legal requirements for reporting.
Yeah, that's a good place to leave this, I think. because we could talk all day about it. But there'll be plenty more to be talked about, I'm sure. But it's been a fascinating session. And I'd want just to say thanks to Terry and to Ray and to Gary. I really appreciate the time that you've taken and the honesty in your responses today, because it is a difficult subject. Not many people want to talk about it. And apologies to everyone who's asked questions. Some of them were answered as we went along, but apologies for those who we haven't answered the questions for. So finally, I promised earlier to give you a little sneak preview of what's coming up in the IET. We're going to be looking on the 24th of April at the evolution of consumer device security. We've looked in the other sessions sort of upstream and within our own industry. This is about the software, the firmware, and the hardware. And ranging all the way through from the first set-top boxes through to today's solutions that the likes of Microsoft, Apple, Google are putting in place. So that should be an interesting session. It's going to be chaired by industry veteran, I know he hates that term, industry veteran and consumer device architecture specialist, Ian Nock. And he's going to have Rodrigo Fernandez from Erdeto and Tom Thomas, who's an expert in set-top box architectures, talking to him. It's on the 24th of April, just after Easter, and that QR code hopefully has been there long enough now that you can register on that. So that's all from this session, and we look forward to joining you at the next one. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Bye.